I thought he must have been a skeleton. He had to be. I mean, he was so skinny. And he walked funny. His bony legs, as narrow and graceless as a newborn horse's, carried him in strange, lurching strides across my backyard, which was littered with balloons and confetti and a table of birthday presents. Oh, and there was cake. Ice cream cake, and regular. Wait, was he a skeleton? No. As he got closer, I saw his skin, which had looked gray and wrong from afar, was flush with color, with life. He wasn't a skeleton. He was a magician. He wore a cape and a top hat and a funny-looking suit, and he was here to show me magic for my birthday. I didn't feel the smile light up my face, but it must have been there because Mom and Dad smiled too. Then the skeleton magician was reaching out for me, his fingers, gosh, how bony they were, slipping deftly behind my ear. It tickled in a way I didn't like. I could feel myself tensing up, but then his hand withdrew, and he was holding the biggest coin money I'd ever seen. "For the birthday girl," he said with a smile that was more of a sneer. I took the coin, hoping it would make him stop smiling. It did. His cheeks were hollow, like Grandpa when he had the big C, and his eyes were tucked into a head which reminded me of a skin-covered skull. I saw in his eyes that he didn't mean it. He didn't think I was special, but I was special. I was the birthday girl. "What do you say?" Dad asked me. I knew the answer, but I didn't want to say it because the magician didn't believe that I was special. "Thanks," I muttered low beneath my breath. "Of course, honey," the magician said. "Only Dad calls me that," I snapped. It was rude, but I didn't like hearing my special name on his tongue. He made it sound wrong. I was afraid my parents would shout, but before they could, the magician smiled and put them at ease. I didn't like his smile. It showed too many teeth. His teeth, like the rest of him, were odd and crooked and far too long. Were they sharp? I thought they might have been, like the teeth my dog Delilah had before she went to live on a farm. But before I could check, he stopped smiling, and the maybe sharp teeth disappeared beneath thin, purplish lips. "Will you do magic?" I asked a little impatiently. My best friends, Lisa, Monica, and Joey, were gathered around me, and I didn't want them to get fed up. "The birthday girl doth ask, and she shall receive," the magician said with a flourish of his cape, and when the billowing silk cleared, I saw he was holding a puppy. "Oh my goodness!" I snatched it from him, smothering the little dog in kisses. "Oh my goodness, thank you!" I loved the magician and my new dog. It was small and white, and had a little brown spot between its eyes. "I'm going to call her Princess." "A princess for a princess," the magician said, holding his hands out in a way I didn't like. It was like he was asking for Princess back. Give her here for a moment. I swear she'll be fine." My parents nodded for me to obey. I didn't like handing over Princess, but I did. He took her gingerly, tucking her beneath his cape, and then she was gone. My dog was gone. He held up his hands, proud of himself for stealing my dog. Where'd she go?" I asked, feeling tears stinging the back of my eyes. "What did you do to her?" "Don't worry, darling," he said, removing his top hat. He tilted the hat, and I saw that Princess was inside. The cold hand squeezing my heart slowly released its grip. The tiny white dog waddled out of the hat and into my lap, and I hugged her so tight I never let go. But wait, as I looked closer, this isn't Princess. The magician smiled that awful sharp smile again. "Of course she is." "No, Princess had a little brown polka dot between her eyes. This dog is just a white snow dog. There's no brown." "Honey, you must have been imagining," my mom started. I stomped my feet and howled. I screeched. I cried. "I want Princess." The little white dog, who was almost as cute as Princess, but not quite, slithered off my lap and into the grass. The magician scooped her up before I could protest, feeding her into his hat, and then she was gone. And now I had no dog, so I screamed even harder. Quickly, He swept his cape again, reminding me of a servant laying out a blanket, and Princess was back. My princess. He handed her to me, and I saw she had the brown polka dot between her eyes, and the world was okay. For a while, the magician showed me and my friends tricks and gags and goofs that made us laugh and ah and ooh, and I saw my friends weren't too bored, so that was okay. Then the finale came. He said this trick was the biggest and the best. Nothing would match Princess, but I thought I'd give it a whirl. "I'm gonna need the birthday girl for this one," the skeleton magician said, gesturing me towards him. My mom held out her hands for Princess, but after what had happened, I nuzzled the dog close and nervously approached the bony man. "Stand very still, honey," he said with a smile, and before I could tell him not to call me that, I saw his teeth. God, his teeth! They were stacked behind his lips, rows and rows of needle-sharp fangs glinting in the sunlight. I felt a scream rising in my throat, but it would never get out. My throat was tightening and wouldn't let anything out, let alone the ear-shredder cry I felt building. I saw the magician pull out a curtain, the kind used to make people disappear, and raise it, meaning to disappear me. I looked to my parents and friends for help. They were all smiling, eager, pushed forward in their seats. And then the curtain came down and erased them from my view. Now I screamed. God, how I screamed. Princess whimpered, cried, wiggled in my arms, and I was falling. Yes, tumbling through an empty black void, but no, it wasn't empty. Floating all around me, suspending in the air like stars, were disappeared things. Tables and chairs and rusted out cars, books and bottles and cigarette lighters. Everything you can imagine that a magician disappeared came here. I fell and they hung, weightless, and just as suddenly, I landed on my butt on the beach and saw all the living things magicians had disappeared. It was night, cold and dark, and to my left a great black ocean filled the world. To my right were mountains, a terrible, terrible trash heap of bodies. Awful tangles of limbs and heads and guts were piled as far as I could see. There were dogs and rabbits and blood-mangled monkeys, showgirls and little boys and old folks and everything in between. Dead, rotting, a black cloud of vultures swirling by overhead. I saw wounded birds with crushed wings and twisted legs, trying and failing to take flight, injured tigers limping about and chewing on corpses, a little boy covered in dirt munching on a woman's leg. Something nuzzled up to my ankle. I jumped back, yelping, only to look down and find Princess at my feet. The real one, the first one that had disappeared. I inspected the dog in my arms and saw she was slightly different from the other at my feet, an imposter. I took both dogs and wandered. I screamed. I called for help, but no one answered, and no one helped me. I was there for years, decades, watching myself grow old. I ate my dogs when they died, and humans to survive. My skin grew wrinkled, my hair gray. I stared out at that ocean for years. It sat smooth and black as sealskin beneath an icy rind of moon. I hoped it would show me a sign, any sign. It didn't, but I was grateful for that awful black ocean. It tasted like death, but the water kept me alive for so long. I built a home beneath an eve of rotting bodies. People disappeared here and wandered. Some fought, some died, some killed. They mostly left me alone. Then I was old. So old. One night, it never changed from night here. I felt death easing its warm blanket in over my shoulders. I curled up with Harold, an old tortoise I'd found, and waited for deliverance. Waited to be rid of this horrible, awful place. Darkness trickled into my vision, swallowing it into a pinprick. I said goodbye to Harold. I exhaled a last, agonal breath and waited. And then, there was light. A brilliantly warm light so bright it hurt my eyes. There was green and blue and sun. Was I in heaven? I squinted. My eyes adjusted. I saw Mom and Dad, still young. I saw my friends, Lisa, Monica, and Joey, clapping. I saw the magician towering over me. I had reappeared at my birthday party, and everyone was smiling. I opened my mouth, and I screamed.